A massive multi agency immigration crackdown announced this weekend led to the arrest of 800 people over 4 days in Florida alone. That comes as no surprise to my guest, who's been reporting on the surging partnerships between Florida law enforcement agencies and ICE. Joining me to discuss it is Laura Morrell, reporter at Mother Jones, and she joins me now by phone. Good morning, Laura.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. You've been reporting on how local agencies have become immigration enforcers, especially in Florida. What have you found?
So, what I found is that since President Trump returned to the White House back in January, he signed an order that basically called on local law enforcement to collaborate more with ICE or with immigration authorities. And after that call, the DeSantis administration, along with Republican lawmakers, passed a number of immigration bills that sort of prompted this increased collaboration in the state between police here and ICE officials. And they do these collaborations through these agreements. As of a couple of weeks ago, according to ICE's own data, these agreements have more than tripled since Trump returned to office, and half of these agreements with law enforcement have been enacted just in the state of Florida between sheriff's offices and police departments here in this state.
And so, why is Florida an outlier? I mean, why are we seeing so much more participation of these agencies and kind of their urgency and willingness to sign up to enforce along with ICE?
Right. Yeah. So that ties back to those immigration bills I mentioned that DeSantis signed a few months ago, and they did a number of things. One of the laws that he signed requires all county jails and sheriff's offices that run those facilities to participate in these agreements, which is technically called the 287G program, and I'm happy to get into that more. So that requires sheriff's offices to do it, but dozens of other Florida law enforcement agencies have also enrolled in the program, even though they're not required to. And there are a couple reasons why that might be happening. One might be a lot of agencies are just worried about retaliation from the DeSantis administration. We saw that a few weeks ago when the state attorney general warned Fort Myers officials that they could lose their positions if they didn't approve one of these agreements with their local police department. And then on top of that, there's also some confusion. There was one bill that was being looked at that would have required all police in the state to engage with ICE, but that bill didn't pass. But it still seems to be causing some confusion among what is required or not required of law enforcement in Florida. And at least one city in Miami-Dade County actually has asked the judge to clarify whether their police department is now required to enroll or not.
And so, some question about local law enforcement being required to participate with these enforcement efforts. But you, as you said, all 67 Florida sheriffs are already, required to participate. We're also seeing participation from the Florida Highway Patrol, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Florida State Guard, the Florida Department of Agricultural Law Enforcement, and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So broad participation from those other state law enforcement agents. What does this mean? What is this going to mean? What does it mean for people who live in Florida, and particularly for people who are, from somewhere else who are living in Florida?
Right. So a lot of Florida law enforcement officials have talked about how they are prioritizing immigrants who have a criminal record. But the thing that a lot of immigrant advocacy groups point to is that these kinds of agreements basically provide law enforcement wide discretion on who they arrest and who they transfer over to ICE custody. And that raises a lot of concerns. Already, and I think it was 2 weeks ago, we saw the arrest of a U.S. citizen in the Tallahassee area. He was arrested by the Florida Highway Patrol. And then later on, he was able to show documentation to prove that, he was born in the United States. So those are the kinds of situations that I think a lot of folks in the immigrant advocacy space are really concerned about. And I also spoke to a couple of experts who told me that these kinds of laws aren't new. They've been around for a number of years. They're just, happening to be implemented more strongly now. That they could lead to a number of issues, including distrust in law enforcement among immigrant communities, increasing fear among immigrant communities and not wanting to contact law enforcement even when they need some kind of police presence or help. It also affects the economy because if immigrants feel too concerned about showing up to work or patronizing businesses, that also impacts, the economy as well. And it's important to remember the context here. Florida is one of the largest immigrant populations in the country. So these laws affect many families of mixed status, where you might have somebody who's a U.S. citizen, but maybe you also have a family member who's here on a green card, or maybe somebody who's waiting for a decision on their immigration case. So it's going to affect so many families across the state of Florida.
Do we know much about, you hear concerns sometimes, in addition to the ones that you mentioned about racial profiling. Is there any research into that? Is there any evidence that shows that that is a concern, a reasonable concern?
Yes, there has been some research into that as well. I mentioned earlier, police having this sort of wide discretion under these immigration enforcement powers. And that's, definitely something that I think groups like the ACLU pointed to a few years ago under the first Trump administration term. That was a concern, and that they had been able to identify some examples of that occurring. So yes, that is another concern. Again, with this increase in discretion for law enforcement.
You were saying that, there's these agreements are called 287G agreements. They have been around for a number of years, including under the Obama administration, the Biden administration, more recently, a great increase in the number of them. But can you sort of break down what they allow for? There's sort of different categories of enforcement.
Right. Yeah. So what we've seen is that the number of agreements sort of ebbs and flows depending on, obviously who's in office and what the priorities are. Under the Biden administration, we didn't see an increase in these agreements. In fact, I think most, if not at the minimum, many of them were just remnants of the Trump administration. And then what we're seeing now is there's a few different models. There's one model where law enforcement have the ability to interrogate people they have arrested, and in order to determine their immigration status and then communicate that information over to ICE. There's also another model where law enforcement can serve immigration warrants on people in their custody. And that makes it much easier for them to notify ICE and transfer people over to federal custody. And then I think the model that's causing the most concern allows police, as part of their daily duties, to stop and question people on the street just on the basis of their immigration status and potentially arrest them, or have, the ability to arrest them if they so choose. And those are the agreements. Most of those are the ones that are currently in place in Florida. And it's frankly a newer model. And I believe, locally in terms of Jacksonville, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office recently signed up for this particular agreement as well.
Just about 10 seconds left. I mentioned at the top there was a big enforcement crackdown announced just over the weekend. Are you expecting to see more of this given the number of agreements and shared enforcement deals?
Yeah, I think the raid is an indication of what to expect in the coming months and years as ICE and local police continue to collaborate together.
Her name is Laura Morell. Her article in the Current Mother Jones is called Florida is Leading Immigration Crackdown. Laura, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, it's an event that aims to build a healthier, more connected community, plus coffee. Here to tell us about the seventh annual Beaches Wellfest this weekend is Tracy Aiello Marko, physical therapist and the event's founder. Welcome, Tracy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're also joined by Mary Mullahey, health educator and director of this weekend's planned coffee crawl. Hey, Mary.
Hello, hello. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So, first of all, what is a coffee crawl?
That's a very good question. So, the Coffee Crawl is the kickoff event for Wellfest. And what we do is we have different coffee vendors from around Atlantic Beach and Jacksonville that set up these wonderful stations for participants to be able to do this beautiful mile loop through the neighborhoods of Atlantic Beach and then stop and taste coffee and different samples. And we even have like a morning tea vendor. So, it's not just exclusively coffee, but big reason for doing this event is one to expose local businesses and in a fun, connective way, and to just promote movement. It doesn't have to be a race where you're trying to go as hard as you can. Just get out and walk with your neighbors and friends and sip on some good coffee and start your day off right.
It sounds awesome. I mean, a walk that's a mile might not be long enough by the time you've had all that coffee. You might feel like animated to go do a little bit
It's true,
more.
and a lot of times people do multiple loops, so we just keep the course basically open for an hour, so you can loop around as many times as you want, and then this year, doing a plug for Go Ruck, they're actually gonna have people be able to take on, like, weight vests, so if you wanna make it a little bit harder, you can put on a weighted vest and walk the loop with that to get a little extra, so we're just
People who don't know Go Ruck, I mean, this
Mhm.
is they manufacture kind of like backpacks and people wear them with weights in them to exercise?
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly, just having a little something to get that heart rate up more and get that muscular endurance up. So we're always looking at different ways to add to the event each year, and we've got Go Rec this year.
And Tracy, you created WellFest. Now it's been 7 years. This will
Yes.
be the 7th year.
Yeah.
What inspired you to start it?
I really just felt like we were missing the opportunity to bring local businesses into the community to kind of open those resource doors and make it more available and easily accessible for people to find different resources that they can use for health and wellness. There's a lot of with social media, like what do you do? Where do you go? Like what do you need to be the healthiest version of you? And for me, that's everything from physical health to mental health to environmental health. And we have those resources and we have those local businesses here in Jacksonville and at the beaches. And so for me, I wanted to find a way to bring them to the community and give them the opportunity to market themselves and give the community the opportunity to have exposure to things that maybe they wouldn't normally have.
And you have a background in wellness. This is
I
not
do.
something you're just coming to randomly.
Yes, yes. I've been a physical therapy assistant for years, and I just recently got my doctorate. So I have a doctorate in physical therapy. I also teach yoga. So I've been the volunteer yoga teacher for the city of Atlantic Beach since 2018.
That's excellent. And Mary, you are also a strength conditioning specialist, an
Yes.
athlete yourself. Now, you said
Oh,
you didn't finish an Ironman, but you participated in an Ironman, which is the way more Ironman than most people uh, do.
I did a half Ironman, so
Okay.
not a full, but I do like to do a lot of different races, especially endurance races. But yeah, background, I'm an exercise physiologist, certified strength and conditioning specialist. I've been working in wellness for a long time now in corporate wellness. So really like to now work more less with the athletes and more just kind of with the employee population, helping them move and stay healthy and just a bit more of that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we mentioned the coffee crawl, but what else can people expect from this event?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so much. So we have yoga at 10 a.m. sponsored by Embody Yoga. And then we're gonna have a moving meditation, which I think is the first time that we've ever done something like this from Still and Flow. And I think it's going to be kind of a fun experience for people for taking that meditation and taking the stigma of do I need to sit and be still and just to get connected with my mind. So we're going to take that away and make it a moving meditation, which I think is going to be very different.
Is that something where people are like walking or just kind of moving
I think
around?
they're gonna be moving around. Honestly, I'm learning too, which is
Okay.
a beautiful thing, is I learn something new every year that we do this. And then we have live music. So Kalani Rose and the Vibe are gonna play for 2 hours. But while all of that's going on, we also have like 35 different sponsors and vendors of local businesses and other nonprofits because we are a nonprofit. So we have other nonprofits come and set up tables as well. So everything from Alcoholics Anonymous to Here Tomorrow, which is for suicide prevention and awareness. They are our title sponsor for the event. So we have kind of everything set up: acupuncture, behavioral health, Pilates, yoga, everything to come try and just learn.
Oh, wow. So all kinds of wellness-oriented things
Hmm.
people can kind of explore.
Yeah, and it's a completely free event, free, open to everybody. As a nonprofit and as a huge advocate for building a village of health, everything that is Wellfest will always be free and open to the community because I don't ever want cost to be a barrier to access for things like this.
Where is it being held? And you said the first event is the yoga at 10?
The first event is the coffee crawl, so
Okay. Oh,
8:45.
wow.
So,
Up early.
coffee crawls at 8:45, but it's open for an hour. So, if you don't make it by 8:45, it's open. Yoga starts at 10. It's at Johansson Park in Atlantic Beach. We do partner with the city of Atlantic Beach to make this event as full and as wonderful as it is. So, we're very grateful for that. And yeah,